Welcome to Found in Translation, a weekly-ish exploration of one fellow's translation of the Christian scriptures, one big idea or big idea recap at a time. My name is Brandon Rhodes, and across the internet from me is the translator himself, Brandon Johnson. Hey, Brandon.
Hey, Brandon.
Good to see you here at the end of all things, or at least all things Johannine for now. It's been a good journey.
Yeah, we've gone through a lot of different things.
Yeah, I have been absolutely bowled over by a few of the insights through the fourth gospel. It's been a real trip. Other seasons, I get giddy and tell one person so that I don't explode. Some of these episodes, oh my God, including that Paraclete one with John 21.
The Spirit.
Yeah, and
life breath.
Deviation. Oh my God. Yeah, I've been spraying people with these ideas at every opportunity. I'm pretty sure I've lost friends.
Oh no.
No, I'm kidding. Hopefully they'll dismiss my deviation. This is the end of season 4.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was thinking we could do today is look back on what we've been exploring and try to see how this all clicks together. We began the season with a introduction about these contrasting how we grew up understanding John and where our journey has taken us. And that journey has progressed even just in our conversation over the past couple of months. It was we both had a sense of it after having you translating and me having read your translation. But then actually talking through it made so much more pop into 3D. So I figured let's talk through that and then maybe read through a passage to see how that all plays together.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So I guess I'll give a recital of kind of what the inherited sense of John is, and then I want to hear hear how that contrasts with where you are these days.
Sure. Yeah.
So I guess I grew up with John being, and including into seminary, John being it's evangelistic. It's meant specifically to help win people over to following Jesus, and therefore is more Hellenistic or Greek in its thinking. It's more mystical. It's much later and esoteric. It is, I guess, often understood more spiritual, quote unquote, than material. Like the Jesus in the synoptics in Matthew, Mark, and Luke is much earthier and grittier, and his preferred name is Son of Man, or Son of Humanity, whereas in John's gospel it's much more the Son of God. There's this sort of Jesus is particularly exalted and glowy in this almost
although I don't think he glows in this one, he does in the others.
Yeah, right. So that's broadly what it is. And so salvation in that old paradigm is almost caricatured in how they talk about the fourth gospel, where salvation is you're being saved from the judgment of God as a sinner so that you can go to heaven or maybe be resurrected or something. But that core story of your shitty embodied beings on a trajectory towards disembodied bliss and shininess Jesus, and you're being specifically saved from God kicking your ass. That's the inherited story. What would you add to that?
Yeah, it's a weird inherited story for a document that starts with the conversation became flesh, became a body, embodied. It's the point is that all these ideas and the spiritual realities are being realized here and now in this physical embodied life together.
Yes. Yes.
That's the point, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we leave this embodied life together and go to a spiritual reality.
No, not at all.
But the language is so weird in the way that it's normally translated that I can see how they get there, right? You know, it's from the conventional translations, so it's easy to get there.
Yeah, like it's a interpretive bias
Mm-hmm.
that is really like finds very natural and even sometimes like almost elevated prose, like the elevated prose of this gospel. Like
Mm-hmm.
it sounds so there's such a syrupy pleasantness to some of it that
Yeah.
it it reinforces that paradigm. Like that feedback loop is core of
Mm-hmm.
what we're trying to break apart here is the feedback loop
Yeah.
of oppressive or problematic or harmful theology
Mm-hmm.
reinforcing in the text. So it's hard to have to always be explaining our way around the conventional translations. It's like, well, let's just have a translation that
Right. Right.
doesn't favor that bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's caught my attention that you called it elevated language. What's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is of the entire Greek Testament, it's the simplest grammatically and vocabulary wise. It's the simplest Greek of the whole thing. Um, it's like the lowest reading level. It's like the fifth grade reading level, and you know, go into Paul and Hebrews, and it's like college level reading level, right? But this is like
Yeah.
fifth grade reading level. But it's also the most like contemplative and mystical, where it's intentionally trying to blur the lines
Mm-hmm.
between spiritual reality and physical reality. And that gets confusing if you're coming from a Western analytical point of view that doesn't do well with that kind of talk and thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to, we need a little help usually.
Yeah, the Hebrew imagination doesn't see spirit and flesh, material and immaterial, as intention in any way. In
No,
the same way that um, this side of
it's
the
all one
Enlightenment Western
reality.
cultures see it. Gnostic spirituality, which was coterminous and a bit more subsequent to the writing of this text, that's
Yeah,
all
didn't
like,
really take off until a few decades later,
yeah, yeah, but that's
but
all.
the seeds were there.
There's
Yeah.
historical precedent all over the place, but to a Hebrew imagination and written by Eleazer, by Lazarus, or even by John, they're both like Hebrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're both like sons of Abraham who are not disposed to think of like material and immaterial as in any sense of tension.
No.
Like as soon as you talk about one, you're talking about the other. That's the way, particularly here in an outcropping of Judaism with this incarnational Christology, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
that word becoming flesh is to like really like let's make that the center point. Let's lean hard into that sense in which the conversation becomes material. The what's glowing up there is what's glowing here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
For more, read The Universal Christ by Father Richard Rohr. uh, but yeah, so where how do you see it now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've already hinted at that as the embodied
Yeah.
nowness of the spiritual realities. Um, there's definitely thinking in terms of what did Christ accomplish isn't about making it so I go to heaven when I die instead of hell when I die, but it's about may your reign come on earth as it is in heaven. It's this, how is it transforming this reality,
Mm-hmm.
uh, enacting liberation for the oppressed, for the suffering, and yeah, really bringing age-long life into this experience of life
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and figuring out how to do that, like how, like, Jesus was doing that. How do we participate in that? Like, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and this is not a retcon of the Bible. This is not taking liberationist, um, anti-colonial, post-colonial theology. It's not taking anarchist theology and saying um, we're going to squeeze the texts through those prior commitments we have. It's saying, in some sense, we're sold on a lot of those things spiritually and through our own personal like journeys, our own sacred journeys, but to discover like actually that makes better sense of the text. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just like we're not cherry picking to justify a post-colonial liberative or healing interpretation of scripture.
Yeah, trying not to anyway.
Try not to.
um,
We certainly do at points. We don't know where they are and we're trying to get better.
right,
But
right.
this work has been one of like going through John and seeing, oh yeah, in order to follow the conventional spiritualizing interpretation, disembodying,
Mm-hmm.
disincarnational way of
Have to
understanding
jump through a lot of hoops to get there.
and bend a lot of notes and cherry pick and retcon. They are retconning the shit out of scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually find much better flow of argument and
Yeah,
soul.
yeah, consistently, whether in this book or others, what I've been finding is that when I just take the simplest view of what it could be saying, it keeps leading me back to this sense of embodied liberation.
Yeah.
um, and it fits together without complication most of the time. But
Right.
if I try to like think through, okay, what is all the systematic theology that I was taught to get through all these other things that I came from, there are so many times where I have to just like, this doesn't make sense together, but I have to like take it on faith, or it only works if every single piece is in place. And then you have this tight like circular system that reinforces itself, but it doesn't just flow out of the text.
Yeah.
And you have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get there.
Man.
um, it doesn't feel like that, I think, for most of us, because we're just so used to that other way of thinking. We just assume that that's right. So then trying to shift into the what I'm seeing now feels a little bit more like the gymnastics, just because that's not where my mind goes automatically, right?
Right.
uh, but if we can set that aside for a moment and just like start fresh, I think it does fit together really neatly and much more simply.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once you trust that it's that I guess once you can no longer deny that there's some loose strands, some phrase at the edge of the map and the story we've been given, um, you can't really go back. I think of
Yeah.
in episode 9, the spirit, what's it called? What did I call it? The spirit, scapegoating, pronouns, and how to forgive sins. From about minute 26 onward, we talk about this John 21 thing where like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus says we can forgive sins, which does not fit in the conventional paradigm of sins are breaking God's rules, therefore meriting God's wrath and your condemnation. And Jesus died to take on that violence so that he can save your goddamned ass. Like that
Mm-hmm.
does not work with that passage or tons of other ones, not least the basic character of God revealed in Jesus Christ.
Right.
Just let's start there. But it also doesn't line up with the rest of the Bible. Um, but that was a great example. Please listen to that episode or the back half of it to see where this sense of like a more elegant integration emerges. Or
Yeah.
we can find one passage in the fourth gospel where a whole crap load of these things all come together. So should we do that now? Should we go to John
Sure.
3?
Let's do it. Which we've done once before already, or a couple of times before.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reason for that.
It never gets old. Okay, so should we do this? Why don't you read until you feel
Yeah,
like riffing, and then we'll keep going.
sure. Yeah. I think some of this first little section here is kind of the setup. So it'll probably read a good chunk of it and then slow down when we get to more of the meat that we're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So starting from the beginning of the chapter, there was a man, one of the Pharisees, named Nicodemus, who was a leader among the Judeans. He came to Jesus in the night. Just want to point out leader among the Judeans instead of Jews there. That's something we've talked about. Rabbi, he said, we understand that you have come as a teacher from God. No one is able to produce the signs that you do unless God is with them. Truly, truly, I'm telling you, Jesus answered, unless someone is brought into being from above, they are not able to understand God's reign. How can a person be brought into being when they're old? Nicodemus said. Can they go into their mother's womb and come into being a second time? Truly, truly, I'm telling you, Jesus answered. Unless someone is brought into being from water and from the life breath, they aren't able to start participating in God's reign. Whatever has been brought into being from the body is a body, and whatever has been brought into being from the life breath is a life breath. So, brought into being from both, you're both, right?
Yeah.
Don't be shocked that I told you it's necessary for you to be brought into being from above. The wind, pneuma, spirit, life breath, blows where it wants, and you hear its sound. But you don't see where it comes from or where it's going. That's how it is with everyone who is brought into being by the life breath. Any thoughts so far? We've hit several of our themes already.
No, none yet. This is nice.
Okay. Okay. Still good. Good setup here. How can these things happen? Nicodemus asked him. You are a teacher of Israel, but you don't understand these things? Jesus responded. So Jesus assumes that a Jewish teacher should understand these things. These are not non-Jewish thoughts. Truly, truly, I'm telling you that we're talking about what we have come to understand, and we report what we've seen, but you don't accept what we report. If you don't trust what I've told you about things happening on the land, how will you trust if I tell you about heavenly things? Now we're going to get into the real meat of it here. No one has ascended to the heavens except the one who descended from the heavens, the Son of Humanity. Just like Moses raised up the snake in the wilderness, it's necessary for the Son of Humanity to be raised up. We've talked about raising and reawakening and all that, but that's a little different than this one here, right?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've got.
we were talking earlier about how raised up, when it talks about the Son of Humanity being raised up, is consistently in this book and others referring to being crucified, not like promoted. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not about being hyped.
Right. And then the twist is that it is about being hyped because the way Jesus is glorified, is renowned,
Yes.
is by accepting that sacrifice of himself for others, giving himself for us. And that ends up getting paired consistently, but it's just really counterintuitive to how most people think of, like, I'm going to raise myself up, I'm going to brag, I'm going to like make sure that I'm getting the attention I deserve.
Yeah, it's not about being a blingy influencer for God. Like the hype of God, the renown, the glory, um, is the solidarity of God all the way to hell. The hell that we create, the condemnation, the scapegoating, the violence. the grave. Like that is the renown of God. We can jump up to end of John 12 to see more of that, where there is this, I believe that's where it is, this extended meditation on the way that raised up is not actually about resurrection or the glorification, the what do you call that, the ascent of God. It's about the downward mobility of God. It's about the solidarity of God with creation, because the whole goal of this isn't to be saved from God's wrath. It is divine union with all things. Divine union, the mystics were right. Divine union is where it's at, and that includes in the social ecosystem of humanity as well. Like being a social space that reflects the union of God. I mean, that gets into John 17, where we're talking about that they may be one as we are one. The conversation takes on not just my flesh, but our flesh. Mm-hmm. That's where this is going.
Yeah.
Like this is a story of the down arrow, not the up arrow. The only up arrow is the raising up of Christ on the cross.
Right. Yeah. Like, as he says, it is necessary for the Son of Humanity to be lifted up, and they're incredulous. Like, but Torah says that the Messiah, the Christ, stays present throughout the age. What do you mean? And yeah, whoever walks in the dark can't see where they're going. While you have the light, place your trust in the light. So you become heirs of the light. You're going to end up becoming the light yourself. Like you don't need me to be here like this forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out how to get this off my.
There we back go. To where you once belong. There it is.
Okay. So it's necessary to be for the Son of Humanity to be raised up, so that everyone who trusts him will have age-long life. We keep coming back to that life. This is all about life. This is all about life. Mm-hmm. Which connects with the cleansing that we talked about, being that ribbon cutting, but also being like rubbing life all over you.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's not about there has to be a punishment and then you don't have to die. It's like, no, we're just like taking the life and covering you with it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You see, this is how God loved the whole world. He gave the one-of-a-kind Son so that everyone who places their trust in him would not be lost to death, but would have age-long life. God did not send the Son to the whole world in order to put the whole world on trial, traditionally judge the world. Mm-hmm. But where am I? But so the whole world would be liberated through him, traditionally saved through him. Mm-hmm. How does that feel for you to have those two changed that way, be put on trial and liberated instead of judged and saved?
Yeah. It just shakes loose the craft of convention in a way that like makes it much more elegant to come home to a more liberative and embodied interpretation of this. In other words, it harmonizes it. It makes it easier to harmonize with that opening passage of like the conversation took on flesh and moved into the neighborhood, tabernacled among us. Like that trajectory of like that being the sense of what the story is about. When you read it as God came to judge the world and save us, I'm defaulting to hearing it through that old lens, but a lens that is disincarnational. So, right. Or incarnation is only a like dip down and like pull us out of the burning building. Mm-hmm. That's not what's going
Yeah.
on here. It's not a rescue mission, it's a homecoming.
Right. Right.
And so
Yeah.
liberation is, I mean, rescue carries that wider sense of like overcoming the occupying forces.
Hmm.
That feels way better than, yeah, saved has just become a religious technical word that's co-opted by um what is a frankly much more gnostic way of reading the story. In other words, a
Yeah.
disincarnational, um non-Hebraic, dare I say anti-Hebraic sense of like what the work of God is.
Hmm. Antisemitic.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, the
Yeah.
Gnostics were totes
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And frankly, a selfish way of reading it. Like it's
Oh, come
we the
on.
way when we talk about being saved as individuals, we're talking about it in a way that the culture that this was written in would have been baffled by. Like probably would have been hard for them to even understand like what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But us as I'm pretty sure American culture is the most individualistic culture that's ever existed in all of history, like by a wide margin.
Mm-hmm.
What European Western culture is not far behind, but I think American is the pinnacle of that.
Yeah, particularly
Um,
white American.
White American, yes, and but that's not what this is talking about. It's going back to the language about age long life versus loss to death. Like that's all back to Deuteronomy, and that what as a community, how are we forming life together?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, are we treating each other? Are we forming a status quo, conventional ways of living together that are about competition, hurting each other, gaining gaining for my selfish working toward my selfish gain at the expense of others? That means the other people are also doing that at my expense. Like it just leads to more and more death. But if we are saying yes to the question of, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my family's guardian and protector,
Yeah.
caregiver? Then I am working for your benefit and you're working for my benefit, and everyone has what they need. Everyone receives good things from each other. That's what age long life is all about. It's the Jubilee, the new creation,
Yeah.
all of that. So that's what we start to hear when we shift from the individual salvation to communal liberation.
Yes. Yes. Let's keep going. Let's see where this goes.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about the
Yeah.
trial too, the Greek
Oh yeah.
krisis, what we normally hear as judgment, and krino, that we normally translate it as judge. So the noun and the verb there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and typically when I hear those words, I think might as well just be saying punishment and punish. That is not what these words mean. It can like kind of it lead there, potentially the word can, but it's really a decision that's being made, often by a judge. It doesn't have to even be in a courtroom setting though, but it often is. Um, but it's really a decision, and the decision can be to declare the verdict as being not guilty. It can be like, I'm awarding you your lawsuit because you've been wronged and you get your restitution now. Like it can also be like, yeah, you hurt that person and you have to pay the restitution. It can be like it doesn't have a positive or negative connotation inherently in the word. It has to
Yes.
be figured out in context.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be the judgment, the decision, it can be the verdict, it can be the sentence, it can be the awarding you your what you've been suing for, like all of these things. Um, then you get into other parts of John that you and I looked at a bit, and like Jesus is saying, the Father doesn't judge. he's given judgment to the Son. But then in a different part, it says this, like here and in other places, it says the Son doesn't do the judging either.
Yeah. So
Right?
like the core question of like God coming to the point, God's coming, the point of it is to judge the world, put the world on trial. Um, if that's what you're looking for, keep looking. Even if there is some that seems to be adjacent to some part of divine homecoming, union, and liberation, but it's in service to all of those things. And even then, like, yeah, John with their memory of Jesus seems to be saying, Lazarus with the memory of Jesus seems to be saying, okay, the Father is not here to judge, like you said. Is that also in John 12, or is that 9?
It might be 9. I don't remember
9.
which. We looked at
Yeah,
5 and 9, and yeah.
yeah. The Father isn't going to judge. That goes isn't going to put the world on trial. Isn't going to assess.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Son's job. And here Jesus is saying, that's not what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah. And then it goes on to say in one of those passages, but there is one who assesses them, judges them, renders the verdict. And it seems to imply that it's their own behavior themselves, like, which fits really well if we're talking about liberation being about a community. So if
yes.
I am contributing to this sense of we're a community of people who uses each other and chews each other up and spits each other out, that's going to come back to bite me,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the judgment that I have put on myself. Uh,
Yeah. Yep.
so it's not God having to punish. God's whole thing is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus' whole thing is love. And yeah, that sometimes that looks like having a firm hand with people who are hurting others. It talks about, in fact, there is judgment toward the leader of this world system, is
Mm-hmm.
one way that puts it. Because this world system is the one that hurts people, oppresses people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. The
but
status quo that um, commands our allegiance and our domination, whose image we come to bear. Like, that's a core tension. The way of life and the way of death in Deuteronomy and into early Christian thought could a parallel to that might be, whose image are you going to bear? Will you bear
mm-hmm.
the image of the truly human one, of the Son of humanity, Jesus, who is a metonym uh, for the human life, fully participating in the life of God,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, will you bear the Jesus image, or are you going to bear the image of the principalities and powers of capitalism and fear and belligerent family loyalty? Are you going to bear the image of patriarchy? Are you going to bear the image of um, heterosexism against queer folk, against trans folk? Are you going to bear the image of white supremacism against all others? And
Right.
on it goes. Militarism, a belief in punitive and penal and carceral violence somehow making the world better. These are all things that we bear the image of. Those are the diffuse leader of the world systems. And that's what's put on trial. Like in episode 9, again, with about the Spirit, we talk about how the Spirit comes to um, convict the world, the power systems, the domination systems of
Mm-hmm.
deviation, of sin. That
Right.
is what is being judged. And so, insofar as that system is being judged, when we bear that image, that part of us which is bearing the image of the world systems of domination, that is what the Spirit is convicting us of. So
Mm-hmm.
the whole trial conviction paradigm is not for a total human being.
Right.
It is for the
Yeah.
systems whose image we bear in part, and therefore there's
We have to be
the ribbon
cleansed
cutting of
of
liberation from
that
that.
part
We
of
are
us.
cleansed from that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is the
Yeah.
old man being left behind in the waters of baptism.
Right. And like we pointed out, it's the false accuser is the one that tries to say that's all you are.
Yes.
And it's false, right? It's
Yeah.
the false accuser. It's the spirit of truth that is our advocate, our defender, the one that stands next to us, that is sent by the Father, the one that we are usually taught is the judge who wants to punish everybody. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, the Father is the one that gives us our defender, our defending attorney, our advocate.
Yeah.
Because and knows that that's the one that's actually saying what's true about us, not the false accuser that says we're in. What's really true about us is that we're a piece of shit, part of the system that hurts people.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, I mean, that is the only place I can grab hold of to make sense of Jesus's command to love our enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Is they are
because
they're always more. All... Yeah, they're always more than the worst thing they've done.
Right. There's more to them than just the one thing or even a long list of things. They are also beloved. There's also good in them. And the job is to do the ribbon cutting on that part growing and expanding and flourishing, that life within them. Yeah. And not just like, well, destroy the whole person because
streams of living water.
Worthless.
Yeah.
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 Yep. So,
yes.
The one who places their trust in him is not put on trial. But the one who does not trust has already been tried, since they have not placed their trust in the name of God's one of a kind Son. But this is the verdict, that the light spoke to the whole world, and people loved the darkness more than the light. Reminiscent back to John 1, we're talking about the conversation being made embodied. Mm-hmm. It was because their actions were corrupt. For not everyone who practices rottenness hates the for everyone who practices rottenness hates the light and does not come near the light, so that their actions won't be exposed. But the one who behaves with integrity comes near the light, so that their actions can be displayed because they have done them with God.
Fascinating. Yeah, there's always a it's almost like it's less of this. I mean, there is kind of a rhetorical dichotomy being made here, but by the end there, it's like those who come near the light, like there's also a, instead of off on switch, it's how close are you to the light, to the source, to how tightly huddled are you to the fire, the sacred fire that churns longing and desire for shalom in each of us.
Mm-hmm. Which even in this story, it's talking to Nicodemus, who came to Jesus in the night, sat around the fire with him. He didn't come during the daytime where there's lots of light, right? But he was curious enough about the light to come peek at it. And then it doesn't really talk about him very much later, but it names him as someone who is part of the church, part of the faithful. Doesn't give any more to his story, really.
Yeah.
But at some point, this sunk in for him. The light grew, and he joined during the day as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But it took a while because he's one of the leaders within the system. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the next story, we've contrasted before, the Samaritan woman, who's been marginalized in like,
oh my God,
countless ways. She's happy to be public about it, about her connection with him in the daylight as much as possible, letting everybody she knows know about it. Whereas Nicodemus is like, I don't know, I'm going to come talk to you without anyone seeing, right? Yeah, that's what this is talking about.
What a great contrast. Like, she's quick to get it. When you have nothing to lose, you have everything to gain. And he is enmeshed in a system that teases him towards this and complicates his capacity to be fully out of the closet, I guess. And I wonder, now I'm speculating here, but if Lazarus is the beloved disciple, and if Lazarus seems to be trained or like a temple person. He was known by the people in the temple. If he was essentially a Sadducee, did he and Nicodemus know each other? Is that how Lazarus got this story? And did Lazarus help him? Did they help one another? Did the one who came out of the tomb help this one come out of the closet, out of the darkness?
It's very possible.
Fun speculation.
Yeah.
Of somewhat low consequence.
Yep. Makes me think of something my friend said once when we were talking about the Magnificat, Mary's song in Luke 1, where it talks about God raising the lowly and humbling the powerful. And he pointed out to me that if God has humbled, made low the powerful, then they're part of the lowly that get raised up, but in a different way. They're not like puffing themselves up. They're raised up along with everyone else who is being made into this community of liberation.
Oh, that's so good. That is so good. Like in the end, love wins. Mm-hmm. And yeah, our place as oppressed or oppressors, liberated or liberators helps inform our place in that line in some sense.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of songs, is there a we were talking about the
Yeah, that's a
song
good
that
transition.
was stirring for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me I'm gonna put it up on the screen here. So this is a song by the group Gungor, who have gone through many iterations, being a more evangelical flavored Christian music group for a bit, and then they deconstructed and became a much more liberation and contemplative flavor of Christian music group. And then they disbanded. It's a husband and wife with their last name being Gungor. And it's Michael and Lisa are their names. They disbanded, did their like solo projects for a while, and then just recently they came back together as Gungor again. But and their music spans a whole bunch of different genres. It's some of it I really like, and some of it I'm just like, this isn't for me. But this is my favorite song from them. It's called Us for Them. And I want to read the lyrics because it feels like it does a really good job of summarizing all the themes that we've been talking about, and particularly what we talked about today with judgment being not punishment, but this sense of making things right, and doing that in the God. This is how God loved the world, that He gave the gift of the one-of-a-kind Son to lead to life. So here it is. When the lines are drawn, when you're in or out, when it's us or them, and we shame the doubt, it is all a lie. All we ever really need is love. There's no need to shed more blood. Look upon the cross. Look upon the cross. See the face of Christ. See the mercy in His eyes. Every valley shall be lifted high. Now our enemies are blessed. The heavy laden rest. For His judgment is love. His judgment is love. There is no more guilt. There is no more shame. All our darkest sin, all our deepest pain. Blessed are the poor, all the lonely, broken, lost, and torn. See, a kingdom comes to us, a war that's fought with love. Our only war is love. Prepare the way of the Lord, wielding mercy like a sword. Every mountaintop will be made low. Know He holds the earth like dust, and His judgment comes to us, and His judgment is love. His judgment is love. We will not fight their wars. We will not fall in line. Because if it's us or them, it's us for them. It's us for them. We reject the either or. They can't define us anymore. Because if it's us or them, it's us for them. It's us for them. Because if it's us or them, it's us for them. It's us for them. Prepare the way of the Lord, wielding mercy like a sword. Every mountaintop will be made low. No, he holds the earth like dust, and his judgment comes to us. And his judgment is love. May our judgment be love.
The word of the Gungar.
It's a Gungar.
Wow. Thank you for that. I'm going to put a link to a couple of streaming services so we can all hear that song on our own time and without violating copyright and streaming rights. Wow. This is it. This is the end of season 4, going through the 4th gospel, the gospel according to Eleazer. Thank you as always. Oh my God.
It's very faint. Is your
my home
phone trying to offer things to you, offer music or something
yes,
to you?
The Apple lady in the music box uttereth. Oh, what a great note to wrap the season up on. The disruption of gratuity and grace in this world. We are going to continue on in season 5 later on this spring. I'm excited to get to share more with you in time about that. But we're going to start scheming good ways to proceed through more of Brandon's translation of the Christian scriptures. So thank you for joining us on the past couple of months of all this. The easiest way to support Founding Translation is to leave us a rating or review in your podcast player of choice or whatever website you're enjoying this on. It makes it easier for more people to find the show. The second best way is to become a sponsor, which you can do for just $5 a month. When you do that, you get comment access on the translation's Google Doc, as well as the satisfaction that you're supporting exceptionally nerdy, independent media. You can find the link to join the community in the show notes. The music you're listening to is by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Founding Translation was produced by Perry FM on unceded Chinook and Kalapuya lands. Bye, Brandon.
Bye, Brandon.
Bye, everybody. See you this spring.